In the heart of the American South, nestled among the rolling hills of North Carolina, lies an institution of higher learning that has left an indelible mark on the landscape of academia.
Durham, North Carolina, among the poorest in the country, had none of the resources that you found in other parts of the country. The idea that a great institution of higher learning would grow out of that region was a bit improbable.
J.B. Duke and B.N. Duke were global thinkers.
The architecture is an announcement of an intent to be around for the long haul.
There was a lot of protest and movement on campus.
Fans wondered, can this man get it done?
Duke was ahead of the times, realizing that team science is going to be the answer to some of our most challenging problems in healthcare.
The excellence that has been achieved in such a short, compressed amount of time is unheard of. How did it happen?
"100 years ago, industrialist and philanthropist James B. Duke signed an indenture of trust as a way to give back to the Carolinas. Amongst the beneficiaries of the indenture of trust was Trinity College. Once signed, the indenture designated $6 million to Trinity College. A few weeks later, the college's Board of Trustees changed its name to Duke University to honor James B. Duke's father, Washington Duke. But who was James B. Duke? What was Trinity College? And how did they find each other? Though most know James B. Duke as one of the wealthiest industrialists of his time, he had humble beginnings. James B. Duke got his start in life as a subsistence farmer on his father's tobacco farm.
The two brothers, Ben the older and J.B. Buck the younger, were devoted to one another. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that their mother died when they were infants.
Hardship characterized much of James B. Duke's early life. When James was 7, his father, Washington Duke, was conscripted by law into the Confederate Navy in spite of being both a Unionist and unsympathetic towards the Confederacy. Washington Duke was later captured by Union forces and released in New Bern, North Carolina. From there, he walked 134 miles back to Durham with nothing but 50 cents in his pocket.
He came home to his farm, which had been decimated, and he collected his children who had been kept by relatives while he was away, and they found some dried tobacco in one of the ramshackle barns that was on the property.
After Washington Duke returned to Durham, he and his children began manufacturing pipe tobacco in a converted corn crib. The Dukes named their business W. Duke & Sons and called their product Pro Bono Publico, Latin for the public good.
James B. Duke is put in charge of all production around 1870 and quickly showed a genius for business.
James B. Duke was an investor. Buck, as he was known, was the businessman.
The guy couldn't get out of bed without dreaming up some new business, and then the next day he would have found a way to have created a monopoly in it. So all of a sudden you have a tobacco monopoly. All of a sudden you have a monopoly in England. All of a sudden you have a monopoly in China.
In just a few decades, the Duke family had created the biggest tobacco company in the world. While Benjamin Newton Duke, James B. Duke, and Mary Duke Lyon helmed the family endeavors, Washington Duke began to consider the possibility of relocating a small college to Durham from rural Randolph County.
Randolph County, beautiful part of the country, but not the sort of place that could sustain a college.
By the 1880s, the college's finances were desperate.
Trinity was about to go broke after the Civil War. They hadn't been able to make the payroll for the faculty for 2 straight years. So they hired a graduate student, John Franklin Crowell. He realized this place is not going to be viable for 1 more year.
The college needed to be in a place that spoke of the future, not the past, and Durham was that place.
When Washington Duke learned of Crowell's aspirations, he proposed that Trinity College be brought to Durham. He offered the school a handsome endowment and enlisted industrial magnate Julian Carr to donate 50 acres of land.
And that move set in motion the creation of the university that we're familiar with today.
Durham was itself a total startup at that time. Durham hadn't existed before the Civil War.
So the move of Trinity College to Durham invigorates Durham,
which meant that we were linked up with a city and an area which would in the future turn out to be really crucial for the state and for the nation.
We're talking a town that's 20 years old that has a racetrack. And somebody said, maybe that could be used as a college. So why don't you bring your college here? And then, it was very successful.
Trinity College opened in its new location in Durham on September 1st, 1892. The oval racetrack had been converted to an oval quad. A railroad boxcar had transported the college bell, clock, safe, and several thousand books. Everyone pitched in. The professor of electrical engineering and mathematics, Robert Lee Flowers, even wired all the new buildings for electricity. Kroll retired from the presidency in 1894 and was succeeded by President John Carlisle Kilgo. In 1897, Washington Duke donated $100,000 on the condition that the school admit women as regular boarding students rather than just day students. The change made Trinity an early coeducational institution.
I think, personally, that Washington Duke saw his granddaughter and knew that he wanted his granddaughter to go to Trinity. And he said, I'll give you the $100,000 if you go co-ed, knowing that his granddaughter wanted to go to Trinity, and she did.
The young institution continued forming its own traditions and flourishing in its new location. In 1910, John Kilgo stepped aside as president and eventually became a bishop of the Methodist Church. With a unanimous vote, Trinity's board elected William Preston Few, then serving as dean of the college, to the office of the president.
President Few is a fascinating person, very quiet. He was an academic, but over time he just grew in confidence because William Preston Few inspired that confidence in everybody around him, in the faculty and the students.
Few had come to Trinity from Harvard and had already considered the possibilities of forming a research university. The concept of a research university was itself a new concept at the frontier's edge of academia.
William P. Few had a vision for creating a school that would be greater than it was at the time, that it would include things like a medical school, that it would have expanded campus buildings, that it would be something that would attract students not just from the local area, but from beyond.
Perhaps it even occurred to William Preston Few that James B. Duke might be reaching the end of his life and had one of the great American fortunes, and what was he going to do with it? And William Preston Few knew exactly what he could do with it.
In addition to his own crucial contributions to the college, Ben Duke kept his younger brother engaged in Trinity's affairs, often acting as a bridge between President Few and the always busy James B. Duke. After meeting James B. Duke, President Few began cultivating a more direct relationship with Trinity College's patron.
William Preston Few, having developed that partnership with J.B. Duke, having laid the groundwork for a great university, I think that's what he did in his own quiet way, exceedingly well.
This letter represents what may have been Few's first letter directed solely to James B. Duke.
We want you to understand what we're doing and to approve of it. And speaking for myself, I am particularly anxious that you shall get enduring personal satisfaction and happiness out of what you have done for Trinity College, because you are able to feel that through it, you have done some permanent good upon the earth. Cordially yours, William P. Few.
While at home and recovering from pneumonia, a number of ideas, many of them foreshadowed by earlier efforts or proposals, began falling into place in his mind. He produced the initial blueprint for a Duke University. Few committed his thoughts to paper. His next step was to consult Ben Duke. Together, they refined the document into a statement written as if from James B. Duke's perspective. All he would have to do is add his signature.
I wish to see Trinity College, the law school, and other schools expanded into a fully developed university organization. It has been suggested to me that this expanded institution be named Duke University as a memorial to my father, whose gifts made possible the building of Trinity College in Durham, and I approve this suggestion. I desire this university to include Trinity College, a coordinated college for women, a law school, a school of business administration, a school of engineering, a graduate school of arts and sciences, and when adequate funds are available, a medical school.
Imagine if you were the recipient of this letter. Someone has written a letter as if you wrote it, and you're supposed to fill in the blank and sign your name. He was not a man of many words, right? So you have this big, long, handwritten letter and then this telegram next to it. Send the plans.
On December 11th, 1924, James B. Duke signed an indenture of trust, establishing the Duke Endowment with a $40 million gift. The Duke Endowment provided support across the Carolinas in 4 defined areas: healthcare, child and family well-being, the Rural Methodist Church, and 4 universities.
I have selected Duke University as one of the principal objects of this trust because I recognize that education, when conducted along the sane and practical, as opposed to dogmatic and theoretical lines, is, next to religion, the greatest civilizing influence. James B. Duke.
It's quite clear he wanted to achieve with this indenture not just the creation of a great American university in Duke University, but the elevation of North and South Carolina. He wanted this section to grow, to flourish, and develop.
The South in the 1920s was kind of a region on the hustle, still striving to become something.
To have found means by which he, William Preston Few, could accomplish what he envisioned for Trinity College. And for J.B. Duke to have found in William Preston Few a person who could create a vehicle through which he could accomplish what he wanted to for North and South Carolina, it must have been magical. I think they probably felt a sense of exhilaration, followed, which is a natural thing, by a sense, not of burden, but of deep responsibility to do right by this.
On December 29th, Trinity's Board of Trustees voted to change the name from Trinity College to Duke University. Duke and Few planned to expand the Trinity College site on Main Street in Durham for the new Duke University. But when the urban land proved difficult to purchase, President Few suggested an entirely new forested site on the edge of town, 1 mile to the west. This would become West Campus.
They didn't wait for Duke to become great and then build a building that made it look that way. First thing they did with the money was to design the plans for a collegiate Gothic university structure with a huge quadrangle in the middle of it to be built on land that was uncleared pine forest, and part of it was a pig farm. A person who can look at a pine forest and a pig farm and say, I'm seeing a great university right here. That's a certain kind of mind.
J.B. Duke selected the firm of Horace Trumbauer to design the new university. Horace Trumbauer's firm had previously designed James B. Duke's private residence, an enormous mansion on Millionaires Row in Manhattan's Upper East Side. The architects at the firm would have the unique opportunity to design 2 new campuses in different architectural styles for the university at the same time.
What we now call East Campus was the original Trinity College campus, and it was flat, and it incorporated older buildings, and so they built the Georgian-style red brick campus in that particular setting.
What they did was they built both the brick East Campus and the Gothic West Campus.
The circumstances were then, and remain now, extremely rare. The monumental task fell to Julian Abel, the multi-talented architect who had worked his way up to Trumbauer's chief designer nearly 15 years prior.
Julian Abel, the first black student to get an architecture degree from the University of Pennsylvania, was hired in the Trumbauer firm.
He had got a chance to execute that vision at this scale. Not a building, not the home of a wealthy person, which was the core business of the Trumbauer company, but a complete campus.
Abel refused to suffer the indignities of the Jim Crow laws then being enforced in the South. By accepting the task of designing Duke University, a school that did not admit black students, Abel tacitly agreed to design a campus that he may never see in person. James B. Duke selected Collegiate Gothic as the architectural style.
The architecture does reflect the strong desire of J.B. Duke himself, who loved the Gothic architecture and saw this as the inspiration.
So at the moment when Duke was going to become a university was the moment when Collegiate Gothic was the primo style.
James Duke was at his heart a buildings man and clearly enjoyed the process of planning the new university. He concerned himself with large planning problems, such as the location and even the style of the projected chapel, and with small details, such as the width of the hallways in the women's dormitories. He wanted and got wider ones. James B. Duke also found creative ways to save money. Instead of using stone from Massachusetts, Duke hired engineers to test North Carolina native stone from nearby Hillsborough. Once the engineers discovered the native stone to not be just suitable, but superior, Duke secretly bought the quarry. The now iconic multicolored stone has since come to be known as Duke stone. Soon after, train tracks were laid to bring the stone to the construction site. The savings amounted to more than $2 million. It would be hard to overstate the public interest in the massive undertaking happening down in Durham. At the time, the construction of Duke University was one of the biggest building projects in America.
People in Durham woke up to a headline one day saying, largest building permit in the history of the South. Duke got a tremendous amount of publicity.
European laborers, drawn by the promise of steady work, migrated to Durham and were hired by the university for their artisanal expertise in stone cutting. Generations later, descendants of those who built the campus remain part of the Durham community today. In the midst of the construction progress on East Campus, James B. Duke suddenly became ill. Just 3 months later, on October 10, 1925, J.B. Duke died unexpectedly after suffering from pernicious anemia, a disease for which there was no known cure at the time. In a special memorial edition, the Chronicle wrote of James B. Duke that, when he gave the money for the erection of the present library and furnished it with books, he sent the famous message,
"Tell them to let every man think for himself." James B. Duke.
The beginning of the academic year, 1930 to 31, was the most exciting in the young history of the institution. After 5 long years, a large, impressive new Gothic campus was opened at last. Classrooms, laboratories, and residence halls bustled with new life. When the school opened, the campus news service issued daily releases to 235 newspapers nationwide because of the intense interest in the new university. Perhaps the most apparent change was an increase in enrollment, especially of women. Official undergraduate enrollment totaled 1,314 men and 471 women. It represented an increase of 91% enrollment of women in 1 year, which coincided with the establishment of the Women's College in 1930, led by its first dean, Alice Mary Baldwin.
Alice Baldwin showed that women would have a real place at Duke as scholars, as leaders of their own communities, and as partners with the men in the search for truth.
Laborers were informed that a select crew would remain to finish a grand chapel after the initial footprint of West Campus was completed. Many proud workers vied for the positions. In particular, those with European backgrounds wanted to work on a Gothic cathedral in their lifetime. After starts and stops in construction during the previous years, Duke Chapel finally opened in 1932. Though it is unclear whether or not he actually saw it in person, the architect Julian Abel cited the chapel as his proudest architectural achievement. In the decade leading up to the 1940s, each student, faculty member, and administrator had a chance to shape the emerging character of the young university. A combination of vision and organization enabled the university to reach new milestones. William P. Few oversaw an expansion of an institution that is difficult to compare in modern terms. Over his 30 years as president, he presided over the institution's transformation from a college of 363 students to a university with 9 schools.
It's not about having more splendid buildings. It's about having a sense of the seriousness of what you're doing.
And you will never have exactly the same way to do it as you do on a great university campus, as a place with lots of different pathways to explore. And the rest of your life, you will feel the patterns of discovery that a place like Duke unlocked for you.
While still serving as president of the university, William P. Few died in 1940. His tenure as president lasted 30 years. He was interred in Duke Chapel. Few was succeeded in his presidency by his longtime colleague and collaborator, Robert Lee Flowers, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy.
I need not point out at this time the vital necessity of every student, of every member of the university community, utilizing his or her utmost ability and talents, not only in order that the university might serve more effectively a stricken world, but that we individually might be prepared and strengthened to meet the new and uncertain world of the future. President Robert Lee Flowers, 1941.
As America entered World War II, Flowers' experience and stature became welcome resources.
It is with full consciousness of the tragic situation into which the world has plunged. Almost each day brings a new call for the people of America to take an ever-increasing part in the defense program of our country.
The university committed itself to one primary focus for the next 5 years: supporting the national defense effort. Almost overnight, a culture of social volunteerism had grown both on and around campus.
Most people seem to think that only the boys will be affected by the change, but the girls can enlist in the defense courses such as engineering, drawing, or committees. Virginia Deming, Duke Chronicle.
In 1941, Duke activated a Naval Reserves Officer Training Corps that began turning out student soldiers. Duke started its Navy V-12 unit designed to supplement the force of commissioned officers. Nearly 4,000 student soldiers would make their way through Duke's NROTC and V-12 programs during World War II. Because of the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941 and fears of an attack on the West Coast, the 1942 Rose Bowl game moved from Pasadena, California to Durham, North Carolina. The game's relocation presented an historic opportunity for the university and for head coach Wallace Wade, who had led the Blue Devils to an undefeated winning streak. After nearby schools loaned their grandstands for the occasion, the stadium's capacity expanded to 56,000. Tickets, priced at $4.40, sold out in 3 days. And legend has it that Bing Crosby purchased more than 200 tickets to the event. The undefeated Duke Blue Devils lost 20-16, but the game nonetheless went down in Duke history as an extraordinary event. Having successfully shepherded the university through the changing circumstances of wartime operation, Flowers stepped away from his position as president of the university in 1949. The incoming president, Arthur Hollis Edens, would need to both lead the university and contend with the challenges of the region. The university required investment. Funds were needed to increase faculty salaries and reinforce offerings in the face of the many students ready to attend.
As you might suspect, my first acquaintance with higher education came in the classroom. I saw that the classroom is a place for exchange of ideas.
This promotional video, entitled "This is Duke University," debuted in 1954. It was commissioned by President Edens as part of a new national development campaign aimed at attracting donors.
Duke is a restless institution, constantly seeking, constantly striving, and where restlessness is, there you may look for progress.
Restlessness and hunger for progress were certainly growing, both in the nation and in the university. Alumni, students, and faculty had written letters to Edens calling for Duke's desegregation since the beginning of his presidency.
To President Edens, from the Men's Student Government Association, only when our school admits qualified students, without regard to skin color, will our consciences remain free in this regard. By maintaining such an artificial and undesirable criterion for denying admissions to students, Duke will eventually sacrifice its present position of leadership in the South.
From the students of Divinity School of Duke University, we hereby request that serious consideration be given by the administration and faculty of the Divinity School of Duke University to the admission of Negroes to the Divinity School as day students.
To Dr. Edens from Virgil C. Stroud, this is to inquire of the possibility of attending Duke University. I am a Negro, a veteran, and would desire to attend as a day student.
Edens responded by asking for patience.
Dear Mr. Stroud, you perhaps are familiar with the past history of Duke University and its policy concerning requests similar to yours. There has been no change in policy.
On the surface, it may have seemed that Edens was stalling what many thought to be an inevitability. But behind the scenes, Edens began his board meetings with the trustees by encouraging them to discuss the issue of desegregation. When his request was met with silence, Edens would have to move on to the next order of business and wait until the next meeting to broach the topic again. The 1960s were a tumultuous decade in American history.
The civil rights movement was the central drama of that time and the central drama of hope and human progress.
When I think about what drives things in the 1960s, it's not simply one moment. It's the ethos and the energy, the organizing spirit that will create and sustain something over time.
In 1961, one of Duke's most beloved sustaining spirits arrived on Duke's Board of Trustees in the diminutive form of Mary Duke Biddle Trent Seamans, granddaughter of Benjamin Duke. Mary Duke Biddle Trent Seamans became not just a board member, but Duke University's connection to its founding family.
She was this gifted person that had a unique style of leadership that she generally got her way. But she did it through love and compassion and empathy.
After an administrative conflict over the future direction of the university, Edens resigned. J. Darrell Hart, the chair of surgery, stepped in to serve as the university's interim president. After years of administrative wrangling behind the scenes, letters, social change, and changes to federal funding requirements, signs of progress towards desegregation appeared. On March 8, 1961, the trustees approved a change in university policy to allow the admission of students to Duke's graduate and professional schools without regard to race, creed, or national origin. The move received vocal support from many amongst the student body. After further persuasion from Hart and others, the trustees voted to desegregate Duke's undergraduate colleges on June 2, 1962. In September of 1963, the first black undergraduates arrived on Duke's campus. Each of the first 5 were the best and brightest in their respective communities and held remarkable records of achievement.
I had the highest academic average, SATs.
Gene Kendall had been recruited from his Greensboro High School by Princeton and Columbia, but Duke offered him a full scholarship, which he accepted to the delight of his family and high school teachers in Greensboro.
When the Duke opportunity happened, I knew that I was becoming a part of an institution of both promise and of historical significance. Then the weight started to settle on my shoulders a bit. That first year, when we would go on group dates with the girls to make sure that they had dates, most of those were football games. There were some times when we would be sitting together and the band would strike up Dixie, which was a very offensive song to us at that time, and you would see the cameras and so forth focus on, because there would be the 5 of us there in the center.
Desegregating means, like, the moment you've brought in 1 or 2 or 5, you've technically desegregated. But if you don't do anything to make their presence mean something for the community at large, you haven't actually done the work of integration.
In the wake of social and political upheaval, Douglas Maitland Knight was inaugurated as the new president of Duke University. On December 11, 1963, students pinned their hopes on Knight for safe passage through what was proving to be a decade of dramatic socio-political peaks and valleys. On November 13, 1964, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech in Duke University's Page Auditorium.
The problems that we still have and the difficulties of the struggle, I still believe that in America we have the resources, that we will solve this problem. And so I can still sing as we sing in our movement all over the South and over the nation. We shall overcome. Thank you.
Previously, people could pretend like the civil rights movement was something that happened elsewhere. On a big scale, the King visit said, you don't live outside of, like, history, and history is happening all around you.
That's when things really started to happen, when we started to get more black students on campus.
C.B. Claiborne came to the university in the fall of 1965.
C.B. Claiborne became the first black student athlete, the first to integrate the Duke men's basketball team.
And there really was this invisible line that you didn't venture across, and coming to Duke was a move across the line.
For him to have the courage to come here, to be a trailblazer, is inspiring and impactful.
Claiborne performed well, both academically and on the basketball court. His play as a freshman earned him a letter to be given out at the Athletic Department Awards banquet scheduled for the spring of 1966. The awards banquet was to be held at the nearby Hope Valley Country Club. Hope Valley, like many country clubs of that time, was still segregated. Claiborne was prohibited from attending the ceremony.
That sort of puts in perspective what the subtle atmosphere was on campus at that time. I was used to it. What can I say? I recognized it because of my experiences growing up. I was ready to encounter this kind of environment.
An historic first came when Samuel Du Bois Cook was hired by the Department of Political Science in 1966. He was a notable political scientist who would go on to serve as president of Dillard University in New Orleans and as a Duke trustee.
Samuel Du Bois Cook comes as the first tenure-track black faculty, not just at Duke, but in the South. Bringing in black faculty matters because it not only allows students to see someone inhabiting that role. It provides them with advocates in the classroom space.
Good evening. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, 39 years old and a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and the leader of the nonviolent civil rights movement in the United States, was assassinated in Memphis tonight.
We are fully committed to these principles and believe that action must be taken at this time of national crisis. Over 250 of us are maintaining a silent vigil on the main quadrangle until our requests are answered. We ask for your support. Thank you for yours.
Duke students began a somber observation that would last for 4 days and would become known as the Silent Vigil.
I think it's hard to downplay that moment with the King assassination and how much it both broke people's hearts and steeled their resolve to push harder and push more.
It was almost like someone had died in your family. And this was kind of true for the whole world. You know, there was this sense of disbelief and the sense of loss.
Organizers enforced strict rules to maintain solemnity, and some professors held classes on the quad in solidarity. The political organizing associated with the vigil emphasized positive action. The recently hired Dr. Cook had left campus to attend the funeral for Dr. King, his Morehouse classmate. Upon his return, Cook spoke to the students assembled on the quad and voiced his support.
You are making profound history. When 15, 20, 25 years from now, you see your life pass in review, you see a playback of your existence, you're going to be proud of what you are doing now. Because you're going to know in your heart that you made a profound contribution to the transformation of the institutions and the quality of American culture.
After the Silent Vigil, the Academic Council, Duke's Faculty Senate, formed a committee to address the student demands. Nonetheless, students remained frustrated.
In local news tonight, disturbances in Durham. Correspondent Dom Baumgartner was on the scene and he gave us this report.
A column of blacks from Duke University's Afro-American Society and their white supporters were surrounded by Durham police, riot-equipped.
On Thursday, February 13th, at approximately 8 a.m., some 75 members of the Afro-American Society occupied Allen Building, renaming it the Malcolm X Liberation School. They presented 13 demands to the administration and vowed that they would not leave Allen Building until these demands had been answered.
The black demands. Number 1, we want the establishment of a fully accredited Department of Afro-American Studies. Number 6, we want a black advisor selected only by direct consultation with black students. Number 10, we want an immediate end to tokenism of black representation in university power structures. Number 11, we want an immediate end to police harassment of black students and demand protection of all black students at Duke.
We had been talking to the university about some accommodations for quite some time. And so this takeover of the Allen Building came as kind of a last resort.
Where were you when this latest activity broke out? Staying out in front of FF Dorm. And exactly what did you see? Smoke. And that in a word is just about what we see right now. Those are police. They're heading back toward Allen Building. Well, right now it's kind of hard to say exactly what is happening. I see some more students falling back.
The violence subsided around 7:15 this evening, and the students regrouped in front of Allen Building. The students adjourned to Page Auditorium for a meeting to be held at 8:30. The students have voted for a 3-day Duke student strike for Friday, Saturday, and Monday. The meeting at Page, which was held at 8:30, reached these conclusions. 1, that the black students suspended this afternoon due to their occupation of Allen Building be granted complete amnesty. And 2, the hospital has reported 21 minor injuries, 18 people have been released, and 3 are being held for observation.
It was a time for the university to acknowledge we were here and acknowledge our needs, which, is the essence of what that occupation was all about.
pretty soon after, you get the establishment of an African American Studies program, increasing numbers of black faculty.
It was about changing the curriculum, It was about changing the experience on campus. These are things we're entitled to as students, and I think the focus was very local at that moment.
Exactly 6 weeks after the takeover of the Allen Building, President Knight resigned. He later reflected,
"The action of the late 60s for me was a divided action. I was pulled between what I knew the university needed over the decades and what the times demanded immediately." Douglas M. Knight.
Knight's resignation draws varied campus response. Student leaders' reactions to President Knight's resignation varied from sympathetic understanding to concern for the future of proposed student reforms. "We'll have to wait and see," said Bob Creamer, a leader of the Vigil last year and chairman of the University Christian Movement. "A change like this provides the opportunity to get better or worse," said Creamer. "I hope students are on the committee that recommends a new president." Kathy Webb, Duke Chronicle.
In the 60s, culturally, Duke was perceived as upper-income, privileged white kids. But in the 70s, might still have high percentage of privileged white kids, but kids who were engaged. Every day, there was a further discussion on what are we going to do to advance civil rights in this country. Every day, there was a demonstration about equality for women. There was a demonstration every day somewhere around campus or around the city about the Vietnam War.
Duke was still struggling as a regional school and needed a unifier to bring it out of this very tumultuous time of conflict.
Present a report to the people by Governor Terry Sanford. During the past 4 years, among other things, I've been traveling about the state, visiting schools, and talking to students about what I hoped we could do in North Carolina.
Terry Sanford was an effective governor of North Carolina. He believed in what he was doing. He believed in the dignity of people, and he believed that North Carolina could be a better place.
Mary Duke Biddle, Trent Siemens, and a few others knew that they had to convince Terry to come and be president.
You're going to hire the governor, who's never been a faculty member, to be the president of the university?
This university aspires to be a leader in all man's hopes. Today we commit Duke to show the way. We must build together here what we would like to see our society become.
Terry Sanford understood that this place had it in it to be a lot more than it was.
In his second week, there was a protest. He strolled past and he asked them what they were doing. And they said, "We're trying to take over Allen Building." He said, "I've been trying to do that for 2 weeks. Can I come with you?" And the students were totally nonplussed. This is not the way presidents behaved, but he did.
I had confidence that Sanford would be able to accomplish things that maybe prior to his administration folk hadn't seriously thought about. But most importantly, a university for the latter 20th and 21st century. And it didn't take long for him to start making those things happen.
Though social change was coming to Duke's campus, it was not coming fast enough for some. Inspired by the progress achieved through the feminist and civil rights movements, students from the Duke Women's College began to push for equal standards. Since the 1950s, the Women's College Social Standards Committee of Student Government had published Design for a Duchess. The pamphlet laid out for freshman women exactly what they had to do to be popular and to conform to the rules. Exactly which clothes to pack, where you could and could not wear curlers, where you could not sunbathe. Duke's women had had enough.
A petition calling for the liberalization of freshman social regulations is presently being circulated among freshman women. Nancy Stewart, Duke Chronicle.
Students propose new co-ed dorm. Thorner said Wednesday he expects the entire RLC to consider the plans next week. The Residential Life Committee last week voted to reject a proposed co-educational dorm for West Campus after a closed debate. Mike Mooney, Duke Chronicle.
The sense of women having a place of their own was definitive for Duke, and the decades of the Women's College stand out in our history. At a time when Duke wanted to be fully coeducational, it was better to close the Women's College and fully integrate the women into Trinity. Once the Women's College as an institution closed, it was a more complicated path, but one that I think was right. I think it was crucial for us to aim for true coeducation.
Duke, not unlike many universities around the country, had women's sports and females competing in sport. It was just more on the club sport level. Title IX is an incredibly impactful, pivotal moment for Duke athletics in 1972. And we've been growing and expanding since 1972.
When I arrived here as an undergrad, which was in the 70s, it was a university that was emerging from being a regional institution to being a national institution.
As you know, Duke is on the move. We will be occupying these new buildings.
I was here in 1980 when the new hospital opened up. There were real teaching rooms, and being on the wards with a facility where you would have teams of individuals, resident students, and faculty in a room with a board learning from our patients. That is what medical training is all about.
The epidemic has become a political phenomenon. AIDS is a frightening disease, but to those who have it, public opinion is frightening and threatening as well.
The emergence of HIV and AIDS in the 1980s, I would say, was a pivotal moment. When AIDS emerged as a disease that we were seeing at Duke, there was this sea of misinformation because there wasn't a lot of science. For Duke, it really was a tangible example of the role of academic health systems. And that role is to integrate science, education, and clinical care. It was bringing together the expertise in microbiology and infectious disease and applying it in real time to what was happening in the clinic. We were the first site to test AZT. AZT was a drug that was on the shelf, was bought off the shelf in a really incredibly rapid time. A clinical trial was planned, and Duke was the first site. And then, of course, it evolved into a much broader mission.
Duke had gotten serious about aspiring for greater national prominence and realized that the way that it would achieve that national prominence, it was being inclusive and having faculty members that were truly experts in their area and contribute to that excellence that Duke was trying to achieve.
Thanks a lot for all the support. First of all, it's 𝐃𝐻𝐳𝐢𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐾I.
On March 18th, 1980, Duke Director of Athletics, Tom Butters, took a chance and hired a little-known 33-year-old coach from Army named Mike Krzyzewski to lead its basketball program.
Truthfully, were you surprised when you were offered the job last night?
I had a gut feeling that I would get the job, and I felt that Duke was right for me, and I hope I'm right for Duke.
1980 also witnessed the first full year for the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. Suddenly, Duke was getting national exposure all over the country as viewers watched colleges battle for championships on the national stage.
Cameron Indoor Stadium, I can't be better. There's no better place to watch a basketball game, and there's no better team to watch.
Rising television coverage brought collegiate athletics alongside professional sports as staples of American entertainment.
The Cameron Crazies, they get their TV time.
It's the best basketball venue in the world. I mean, I played in a lot of gyms. I played in Madison Square Garden. I was talking about Pauley Pavilion. It's a different feeling.
I think that young people can see, if I come to Duke, this is what part of my experience can be. In 1991, obviously made it through the tournament, got to the Final Four, and then played Kansas in that national championship game.
Over to Jamison, driving on him. Oh, no foul. Great play by Leitner.
Once once we were 7, 8 points ahead going down the wire, it became clear that wasn't enough time left for them to get it back. And we started jumping and shouting and yelling and doing everything.
Jordan will put up the jumper. It doesn't matter. Duke has won its first national championship. The first time I've seen Mike Krzyzewski smile, he knows he has that monkey off his back.
First of all, I want to thank our fans from Duke University.
After we win a national championship, the application numbers skyrocket.
It's been a year of extraordinary success. I think that also unified the campus, brought it together, a spirit, an excitement, and it put Duke out in every newspaper in America.
Keith Brody, a distinguished psychiatrist, was Duke's president from 1985 to 1993 and served as a bridge between the medical campus and the rest of the university.
Well, academics at Duke, I think, are just outstanding. It's rare to have undergraduate education embedded in an overall university structure with so many different professional schools.
The interdisciplinary atmosphere proved fertile soil to grow Duke's national reputation as a research university.
It's much more fun to be in an institution that thinks, hey, we're on our way and the future is ahead of us and we are going to grab it. And that was the way Duke felt.
With all of the fame of Duke spreading nationally, Nan Cohan was inaugurated as Duke's 8th president in 1993.
I grew up in the South, and I had gone to college in the North. One of the many things that attracted me to Duke was the chance to go back to the South and be part of a great Southern institution, helping to make it even greater.
She was the first woman to be named president of Duke and one of very few women university presidents in America at the time.
When I came, the challenges that we faced were not so much obstacles as carrying forward our mission, but how do we deal with the specific issues that we have to face? When I got to Duke and learned that we were called the plantation by some workers, and I thought that is something that cannot last. We've got to get past that barrier.
Senior staff began considering the relationship between East Campus and the neighboring community.
We felt that it was even more important to be part of this city and not just happen to be located here. And so to go to people and have people like Bill Bell, who knew our neighbors well, but knew Duke well, and say, Duke wants really to be helpful. What do you need? How can we help?
Duke has been here a long time. And so when you go into a community right next to them and start talking to the residents about what can they do, they say, what can they do? They've been here 100 years, they ain't done nothing. That's why all of a sudden they got you coming here asking what can they do. So you had to get over that type of a hurdle.
In 1996, Cohan and John Burness established the Duke-Durham Neighborhood Partnership. Durham residents would enjoy increases in home ownership, improved student achievement, and expanded access to health care.
Started getting shared ideas of things that would be beneficial. Becoming a part of the broader city, which was not an easy feat, because part of it was convincing Durham that Duke could be trusted. But managing to do that because of programs that her administration initiated with the city and made it a part of Durham and a participating part.
In 1998, Duke partnered with Durham Regional Hospital, Raleigh Community Hospital, and other regional healthcare practices to form the Duke University Health System.
That's the real key thing, creating a health system that can be nimble enough to be competitive in the 21st century and making one of the best systems around the country.
Once that happened, then Duke itself became much more known to the community, not only for what it was, but what it produced.
Certainly it felt very different to be in Durham when we left from when we came. And I do think that was one of the most important things our team accomplished.
Nan Cohan had been a very successful president and had done lots of good things. And so when I came, you had a base of things that didn't need to be done because they'd already been done.
Dick Broadhead became Duke's 9th president in 2004.
Duke's president's job has never been to preside. It's always been to figure out what could we be next? What could we do next? How could we use this as the base for going to the next step?
In partnership with the government of Singapore, Duke NUS Medical School enrolled its first students in 2005, becoming one of Duke's early notable international ventures. The school's opening was followed in 2006 by the creation of the Duke Global Health Institute.
Here you've got a university with not only medical assets, but actually assets in everything, thousands of subjects. But what if you could pull those together and try to actually link them to the world of health challenges?
The success of the two initiatives fueled further consideration of the ways in which Duke could contribute across the globe. In 2006, the Duke lacrosse case catapulted Duke into the national spotlight. False accusations of rape leveled against members of the men's lacrosse team by a Durham woman became a flashpoint of race, sex, and privilege, and led to a painful chapter for the university and Durham community. In 2007, after a tumultuous year of investigation, all charges were dismissed. Following this incident, Duke launched two initiatives focused on improving the strained relationship between Duke and Durham. The Office of Durham and Regional Affairs was established, and a program called Duke Engage was created to give students opportunities to get out of their classrooms and engage in service to society locally and around the world.
Duke Engage is the idea of trying to get students out into the world. Let's have them figure out, did any of those things you studied as an academic subject give you any tool to help people figure out how to solve a problem in a real-world setting?
Simultaneously, the city of Durham was reinventing itself as a site of innovation and entrepreneurship. In 2012, Duke professor Robert Lefkowitz won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. In 2015, Duke's Paul Modrich earned a Nobel Prize in Chemistry for showing how cells repair damaged DNA and safeguard genetic information.
In the course of 3 years, we've gone from 0 to 2. It's an important benchmark for a university to be able to say, we have Nobel laureates on our faculty. I think it adds luster to the reputation, and it helps attract other faculty and top students.
In 2017, Vincent E. Price was named Duke's 10th president. Price came to Duke after serving as provost at the University of Pennsylvania.
I knew I wanted to come to Duke University. All the things that were great about American higher education existed here at Duke. And so the sense that this was an opportunity was very real to me. Our new century calls for a university audacious and visionary enough to fundamentally redefine teaching and learning. Our new century demands that we prepare ourselves for a diverse and often chaotic world. We need to work together to defend, even to seek out voices that are different from our own, that confronts its own problems as readily as it does others, whose challenges, controversies, and crises do not stop at Duke's gates. Are we bold enough now? Our new century calls for a university that grounds its ambition to heal and serve the world in humility. Our new century cries out for a university where the drive to discover is not hemmed by disciplinary logics. And now it is for us to push further along and to blaze a new trail toward brighter days ahead.
It's academically sound,
but it's not so pressured towards that the people lose sight of what's important in life.
I care about being a driven student and person who cares about academics but knows that there's more to life than just school.
Duke has everything. We're good musicians, good sports, good athletes, and good people all around.
I care about my relationships with other people. I care about trying to find success in whatever I do, trying to work hard at anything I put my foot forward to.
Would you like to be a corporate executive?
Of course, I'm shooting for the top. I mean, I start out from the managerial positions, and then I go for the top. I go for the top guy.
What I really enjoy about Duke and its preparation for later life is realizing what your passions are and joining things like dance teams or having a wide breadth of extracurriculars that you're involved with.
I had to make a lot of new friends over the years, though. I've got like 15 family members in, all wanting to do different things at the same time.
So you take them to the gardens and let them loose.
We are in our centennial year, so I think it's exciting to see how far we've come since the very beginning of Duke, and I hope that it continues for many more centuries.